Hi everyone, welcome back to Crochet Rocks. It's Tracy here, and this is a continuation of my beginners course. And in the last video we concentrated on the shaping that you're going to need to do this pumpkin. Now the latest one I've done is this one. It's a DK weight pumpkin, and I kind of hurried it towards the end, but we're going to make this one. So I've got my chunky, my Aran weights, they're both there, and this is the latest one, the little baby one. So I'll give you some information. You might need to figure out what kind of stem you're going to use. Now some people put in, hang on, let's go down a bit. Some people put in a cinnamon stick, which is fine, and you get the nice little fragrance of it. But I just collected, excuse me, that bit fell off. I've just been collecting little twigs from the garden, and that's what I've used. So in the chunkier ones I use these kind, and you can use the good end, like this one. You can see it's kind of got a good end, and this one here. But in the tiny one I use the smaller ones, I use these. So you can just collect it, or you can make a stem, but I figured making a stem might be a bit of a tall order at the moment, so we'll concentrate on using a stick for now. So and for this tutorial I'm using a DK weight. Now I don't really have any decent orange, so I'm using this mustardy colour, which I think when they're all together in the pot actually makes quite a nice collection of pumpkins. And I'm using a 375 crochet hook. So the kind of trick with these, and with any kind of amigurumi, I feel, is to use a smaller hook than you would normally for that weight of yarn. So for the DK, now this is quite a nice size DK, so I'm using the 375, but you can use a 325 or 350 and you get a much tighter kind of amigurumi where you won't get anything, you won't see through it at all. For the Aran 4 weight, I've used a 4.5, and that was the mustard one here, which I made this one with Poundland mustard, and this one was Stylecraft Special Aran from my stash from my shop. And I think this one worked a little better because it is kind of a softer, more pliable yarn than this one, which is a more coarser sort of Aran than this one. However, this one did make it bigger, which is weird because they're both 4-weight Aran. I use the same hook and the same amount of rows. So it's quite interesting really that you can make this bigger or smaller by using different yarns. So this was the chunky, and as you can see it's made a much bigger pumpkin. So that's the sort of trick. Now with these I've used the normal kind of wadding that you can buy to stuff amigurumi projects. So that's the stuff you find in your pillowcases more often than not, you know, the white kind of fluffy fibre fill, whatever it's called. But that's what's in these pumpkins, and I've been kind of experimenting with making them more and more stuffed each time and see which one works better. This one kind of worked the best. It keeps its shape more, and that was the more stuffed out of all of them. So for this particular one though, I've used odd scraps of yarn, and I did stuff this one quite well, but it's, I don't know, I find the fibre feel is a little bit better, but it might just be me. And I think once you've made these, you do need to shape them a little bit so that you can get a nice kind of tighter bottom. You can shape that and pull it into place and maneuver your filling around, and it gives you a more pumpkin, well, or capsicum kind of pepper shape. But if you want the more rounded, you can just, you know, you can squish it around and get it in the shape that you want it. So without further ado, I'm going to just pause it for a second and come back and we'll get started. Okay, so I've got rid of everything from the table, and I'm just going to now show you how to get started. I didn't get rid of all of the bits of my twig, but hopefully it won't be too annoying. Okay, so we make our slip knot, which remember is to make a loop, and the yarn that is the working yarn goes behind, comes through, and you pull it, and you've got your slip knot. Okay, so we insert our hook, and we're going to make 27 chain. Now this time round, normally on a project you don't want them tight, but for this one you don't really want them really loose. I won't say mega tight, but just keep your tension nice and even. So we yarn over and pull through. Remember, we've already done the beginners courses on how to do a chain and the stitches that we need. So if you need to refresh, then there will be a link at the end for the right-handed versions and the left-handed versions if you need to catch up with any of the beginners ones so far. So that's how we do a chain. We yarn over and pull through. Now I'm going to do 27 of those, and it's very annoying enough for people count when you're trying to count. So I'm going to pause it and I will come back to you once I've got my 27 chain. Okay, so I have my 27 chain now. Now we're just going to go in the normal loops. Sometimes you will find you get asked to go in the back loops, which if you turn your chain over, you can see is this hump. But for now, we're not going to be doing stuff like that. We're just going to go into the normal part of the chain. Now we're going to go into the second chain from the hook. And remember, this loop doesn't count. There's our first one. And so this is our second. And that's the one we're going to go into. And we're going to just do a slip stitch. So we're going to insert the hook. We're going to yarn over. We're going to pull it through and pull it through the loop. Whoopsie, I've split the yarn there. Pull it through the loop on, it's so hard when you're showing people, through the loop on the hook. There we go. So much easier when you're doing it for yourself. And I've got, the yarn is split again. Not the best yarn. So that's the first one. We're going to do 3 like that. So we're going to go into the next one, insert our hook, yarn over and pull through both loops. So the loop we've gone into and the loop on our hook. We're going to do that again. Now remember, the last video I showed you covered all of these stitches. So if you need to, just go back and watch. So we've done 3. And now in the next 5 stitches, we're going to do a UK double crochet, which in the US is a single crochet. Now these first rows are obviously the ones that are going to look more confusing. So I'm going to stay with you and we're going to do them together. So you can see the one that you've come out of if you wiggle it. So this is our next stitch. We're going to insert, pull up a loop, and we're going to yarn over and pull through 2. So that is a UK double or a US single crochet. So I'm just going to hold on to that, and we're going to do that again into the next one. You can see the one that you're in. Okay, so we're going to do 5 all together. This is my last one. So I've got 5. Now we're doing some shaping, if you look. Now we're going to get a step taller. And in the next 10 stitches, we're going to do a half treble, which is a half double in the US. We're going to yarn over. You can see the one that we're in, and we're going to go into the next one. Pull up our loop. We're going to yarn over and pull through all 3. It's a bit of a splitty yarn, this one, so I won't recommend it to you. We're going to yarn over, go in the next one. You can see where you're in. We're going to go into the next one. I'm going to carry on until we've got 10. There we go. I have 10. Now, if you haven't yet, then just pause it and catch up. But as you can see, we've now got a bit taller. So I'm expecting some parcels today. So if I have to pause it, don't worry, I will come straight back. Okay, so we're going to do, just as we did this side, we're going to do 5 UK doubles or US singles in the next stitches. So we're going to go in, pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And we're going to do 5 of those. So that's my 5. If you need to, just catch up with me. And you can see we've got 3 left. And those are the ones we're going to do our slip stitch. Now we're going to do, as before, pull through that hook. Sorry, that hook loop and the one on our hook. And on the last one, we mustn't make it too tight. And there is a reason I'll show you on the next few rounds. So we try not to make this one too tight. Okay. Oh, this yarn is annoying. Now I'm going to do 1 chain and cinch it down. Now as I look at my work, this is my first stitch because we're going to turn and we want to go into the back loops only. So a little tip for you is you've just done this chain here and cinched it down, and that is your first one. If you're just going to pop your hook through that loop there, then you're going to be in the right stitch when you turn to do our slip stitch, because sometimes it's confusing to see the stitch you want. But you should have this little cinched down V here, and then the next one is the one we want. We're going to go in the back loops only, just like on the previous video when we did the shaping that we need. So we're going to work only in the back loops from now on. So it's just that one loop, and we're going to do our in our next 3 stitches we're going to just do the slip stitch, working in the back loop only. Now do be careful, because when you get into subsequent rounds you can go through the back loop there and into the one below. So make sure you only have the one on your hook when you, oops a daisy. It's very difficult when you're showing people. It's fiddly. There we go. So we've done our 3. Now we're going to go straight in with our 5 UK doubles or US single crochets. Exactly the same as before, but just working in the back loops. Now if you turn it slightly, you can see the V at the top of the stitch, and you can easily see where you've got to go next. So we're going to do our 5, and that is going to be the same on every single row. Trying to be as slow as I can for you so that it's easy to see. Okay, so now you can see the shaping is starting to take effect. I'm going to zoom a little bit so I can get further away, because I keep clashing onto the camera. Okay, so now we're going to do 10 half trebles again in the back loops. So there's the front of our work, and we're forming this little ridge here by working in those back loops only. So we're going to yarn, you can see the one you're in quite easily by moving it. We're just going to go in the back loops, and we're now doing 10, just the same as before. There we are. That's my 10. You can see this, the shaping is starting. So we're going to do our 5 of our UK double crochet, US single crochet. Remember, always working in the back loops from now on, every single row. And now we have our last 3, and we're going to do our slip stitches in them. You can see them at the back. Now the last one, as I showed you on the last video, it can be hard to find it, but you soon get used to it. Now that's annoying when that happens. Okay, so the last one, you can fiddle around and find that back loop. I think I went into all of it. Yes, I did. And remember not to make that too tight. And we're going to do a chain, cinch it down nice and small, and you can see there's your chain that you've just done. This is your first stitch. And remember, if you want to, you can just pop your hook in there and you're going to know exactly which one it is once you've turned. And we're going to do our 3 slip stitches. 1, 2, 3. Now what we've been doing so far is our repeat. 3 slip stitches, 5 UK doubles or US singles, 10 half trebles or half doubles, and then back to the 5 double crochet, which is single US, then back to the 3 slip stitches. So we're kind of making a thing that's shaped like that at both ends. Okay, so we'll stay with you because now we can see there's a row beneath, and this is where you have to kind of watch what you're doing, because this is the one we're in, remember? So we can see that our next one, it's ever so easy to go in and catch this one. So just be careful that you don't do that, and you don't make your work too baggy either. Remember, this is the front. We're making that little ridge. You just need that one behind. So get used to, if you want to, of turning it over like this and you can see where you're going. Now we're doing our 10. So that's 5 of the 10. And I'm just going to let you know that when I said don't let it go too baggy, remember you can control your tension just by closing this finger up or loosening it off. So don't worry too much about it. We're using a smaller hook, remember, so that's helping. So I'm going to do the rest of my 10. Okay, now we're on the 5. And now we've got the last 3 slip stitches. Now I just want to let you know that if you've got to the end and you've gone wrong and you suddenly don't have 3, I've done that myself. Because they are quite fiddly little stitches, all I do then is go back and start that row again and make sure that I go in that first stitch, because it's the first one that can throw you off, which is why I'm showing you that little trick at the end. Okay, and we'll do it once more. So we're going to do 1, 2. Okay, and it is difficult to find, but you can just fiddle about until you get it. Right, there we are. So we've got our stitch, we'll do our chain, cinch it right down, and then put my hook in and turn. That way I can keep an eye on my first one, and I can easily start my next row with my 3 slip stitches. So we'll do another row and then we'll have a little look at what we're doing. Okay, just need to pull out some more yarn. Bear with me a second. So I've done my 3 and I'm now starting my 5 UK doubles or US singles. And if I go ahead of you at any point, just pause and catch up. I do try not to race ahead, and because this is quite a changeable and fiddly, I think I'm slower on this particular project than ones where it's easy to rattle on. Okay, so now we're going to do our half trebles or half doubles. Oh, didn't go through all of it there. When I made my little pumpkin, I didn't notice that it split that much. Okay, so that you've got the gist then. What we need to do is to carry on and get to the end. So we've got our 3, our 5, our 10, our 5, our 3, all in those back loops. So I'm going to pause it there, and I will come back to you once I get to the end of the row. Okay, so I've made it all the way back. I'm just going to make that loop big so I don't lose my space. And as you can see, it's starting to make these bumps and ridges, and that's what it looks like on the other side. So you can see then that you're going in and out, making this kind of bumpy texture, which is what the pumpkin is going to look like. Now we're going to carry on just doing that every single row, and we want to make sure that we have enough rows to make the round. So I've kind of worked on the basis that there's around, depending on the size, for the larger ones about 12 inches, and for the smaller ones about 10 to 11 inches. You'll kind of get an idea once you're there, to be honest with you, but they've all measured roughly about the 11 or 12 inches. Now you have to kind of, because they do curve around once you get to that stage, you do have to measure sort of around. But we'll carry on, and I'll come back to you once I've got all of my rows complete. It's not a set number of rows. It is just purely around about, you want 11 or 12 inches. You'll see when it looks right, and I'll show you what I mean when I've come back to you. Okay, so I'm on my last row. Now, this was my first row, and so I want to finish on the same way. So my yarn will finish and end up this end, and I've just got my last 3 slip stitches to do. Nearly done. So the last one, sometimes you have to fiddle and fish with it to find it. There we go. Now I'm going to end off this yarn, but I'm going to make a nice big long tail, and I mean a really long tail, and then I'll cut it off. And I'm going to finish in the normal way by doing a chain, pulling it right down, and then pulling all this yarn through. So I've got a nice big tail. Okay, so I measured mine, and this one, it looks like a lantern. Let me just zoom out because I was zoomed right in for the thing. So yeah, it's curling at the ends, so we take that into consideration. I cut it in half, turned it in half, and I pulled it out because obviously it does kind of bow up, and then it does actually measure, once it's all pulled out, the 5 inches, which makes it 10 inches in total. So there is no right or wrong. If you want to make this 11 inches, 12 inches, perfectly fine. It would just be a bit on the fatter side. So the way I worked it out was with a DK, I would do it a little bit less. With an Aran, maybe I would do kind of 11 inches. With a chunky, I'd do the 12. But there is no right or wrong. It is just personal preference. So now we're going to attach it. So we need a pair of scissors and some darning needles. Now I always use the biggest eye darning needle. And let's just pop this away. Okay, move them out the way. I don't need the hook anymore. Okay, so we're going to threadle up this darning needle and sew our edges together. Now you can crochet them together if you're able to, but this is obviously part of my beginner's course, so we're just going to concentrate on sewing it. Now I'm just going to pop that end inside. We don't have to sew these in because they're just going to be inside. So I'm going to go through this particular stitch and the very first one, just to get my yarn on that side, and then I'm going to turn it, and this is the side that I'm going to sew it up. I'm going to catch the end of this. See, there's my row, and we've been going in these back loops. We're going to go in the front loops to sew it up. So this one is our first one. We're going to just go through the stitch, and then in the second one we'll grab just the first loop. So you've got the first loop there and the second loop. I'm just going to grab those like this. So I'm going in the whole stitch for this one, and just, oopsie, without like losing it, just in the front loop of that one. I'm just going to sew it up. I have to pull it mega tight, just as long as it's not baggy. So you can see this is our foundation chain row, and you can go through the 2 loops of that. It's perfectly fine as long as you go through this first loop. So just to show you again, when we were working in it, we were going in these back loops, which are here. We're now sewing into the front loops. That way we keep our little ridge that we've been maintaining all the way through, you know, all these ridges as best we can. So we're going to just keep going all the way along, sewing this together. Nice and easy. That's why I wanted a nice big long tail this time. Saves if you did cut it off, if you ended, you can always attach your yarn again, but the more attaching, the more ends. That's the way I look at it. So you just carry on doing that all the way along, going through the bottom part and into the front loop. And what you're doing is you're closing it up, but you're keeping the ridges. And so it won't show so much where your join is. Okay, so because this is a bit boring to watch, I'm going to pause it and I'll come back to you when we get to this end, and don't end off. Okay, so more or less at the end. Not far to go. Just make sure you try and go in all of those. Oops. It annoys me when that happens. Silly things annoy me. Okay, so in the last one, so we've now got that together. Now, just to end that off, I'm going to go around it once more. It's a very splitty yarn. It wasn't like that when I made my first one. And I make a loop, and then I go into that loop and it causes a little knot just to pull down, and now that is finished. So here we got our little pumpkin all sewn up, looks a bit like a lantern. Now one of these ends you want a little bit tighter than the other, because obviously you're going to have to poke through your little stalk, unless you have learned how to make one, which is a little bit more difficult. So because you're not, if you make one, then it's perfectly safe, nothing will ever come out of it, you can give it to a child. But if you're just putting in a cinnamon stick or a twig, then really it's just for decorative purposes, because I don't think that would be safe enough for a child. So now we're going to cinch this end closed. It's not massive. I really like the way this looks at the edge. It's pretty cool. I like that, the way that does that. So now between each ridge, we're just going to insert our needle. I'm going to come back round, go in between the next ridge, and we're going to come back round and go in between the next ridge. So you can see there's a little kind of area there. Now, you don't have to be absolutely accurate, and if it gets a little bit stiff, you just pull it through, okay, like that, and you can, where's the end? You can cinch it. So we're going into the next one. It's between all the ridges, into the next one, into the next one, into the next one, into the next one. Just pull it through, and again you can pull it tight. And this is how we close up our ends. Sometimes I've done this before, use on a hat, things like that, when I've needed to close up an end. If you can't see where you're going in, it doesn't really matter if you go into the actual ridge itself. I think I might be trying to go in the same one I've come out of, which is what's not working. So you just go in. Doesn't matter if you go into the top one loop or two loops, really doesn't matter. As long as you're just going in, and every now and then you pull it so you cinch it. It gets a little harder to see towards the very end. That's the only thing. But we just carry on all the way around, going over and through. And then I've got a feeling we are more or less back. Let's get back in that one. Okay. Now if I pull it as hard as I can, you can see it's quite cinched up now. So on the next round, when we cinch up the next part, if you're using a twig, I would recommend having your twig in it inside already before you cinch that closed, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult. So now we're going to have to tighten that off. So I'm going to go into the inside of my work, just pop that in there like that, and I'm going to tie it off from the inside. So I'm just going to turn that inside out, and all I'm going to do is what I did on the last part, is just do a little stitch. Easier said than done getting it in. Okay, wait until it's almost all the way to the bottom, go back into it again, and then pull it tight, and that's knotted that. Now I'm not going to end there. I'm going to now stuff my pumpkin, and I'm going to leave this attached. It doesn't matter if the needle falls off, but when you use yarn, sometimes it's easier to leave this in and go through the whole thing. Other times not. So I'm just going, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it through so it's actually coming out the right end, and just take this off for now. So now we're going to stuff, push that inside, we're going to stuff it out. Now I'm not sure if I've got enough of this. I probably do, because it's quite fluffy, so we're going to give it a go. Now this is harder to sew through than when you stuff it with remaining yarn, and when I stuff it with remaining yarn, I just do this, so it's all in my fingers, and then once I've got a big wad, I'll stuff it in. I don't put it in like a ball. It's too much of a ball shape already. So basically we need to push as much of this in as we can because otherwise we get a very misshapen pumpkin. And this is getting quite tight and big and fat in there. And I think if you did less, say if you did 8 inches, you'll be left with a much smaller pumpkin. Now, if you do too much, it pushes it out and you lose the ridges. But I think that's probably enough. Maybe a little too much. We'll take a bit out. I have been a little bit in the past, took too much out, and then I've got a bit of a saggy pumpkin, and nobody wants a saggy pumpkin. Okay, so I'm gonna cut this off, and I'm gonna use the same yarn just to thread all the needle back up again. It's easier than trying to show you how I go through it all the way. Okay, so I'm just going to attach it anywhere, doesn't matter where. I can attach it there, where the other end is, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to do that by just sewing through the wrong side like that. And I'm going to just tie it, because I'm going to poke the end inside. You're not going to see it. I'm not sewing it. You can sew it in if you want to, but I just think it's a bit of a wasted time because nobody's going to see it. I'm just going to put that in there with the other one. And now I'm going to do the same thing in between the ridges. Just catch in. Doesn't matter if you catch the actual ridge. It really doesn't matter. We're just going to cinch it back up again. Now, because I've used this yarn a few times, it's getting a bit tangly. Just pull it tight. And we're going to go around again. It's harder when it's full up. But you just play with the amount of stuffing that you use. If you want more, put more in. If you want a bit less, then take some out. But we just keep poking it in as we go around. I think this is the most stuffed one that I've done so far, because on all the others I was using my stuffing a bit sparingly in case I ran out before I did the tutorial. So now I seem to have lots, and I've got an overstuffed pumpkin. But it's just playing with it, really. You just get it how you like it to look. Just as before, there's no right or wrong with the thickness that you decide to make it. There's kind of no right or wrong with how much stuffing you want to put in. It's your pumpkin. Okay, so now we're getting towards the end where we do need to kind of put our stick inside. I've broken it. Don't worry about it. Doesn't matter too much. It's just a stick. And that way we know that we're going to have it the size that we need. So before I put that in, actually, I'm going to show you, because otherwise it's going to get in the way. I'm back to the start, because that's where I started off, at the same place as the other one ended, which hasn't stayed in. It's a bit annoying. So anyway, I finish off there and I pull it as tight as I can, trying to leave a little hole there. Now, can't go inside to end my to end off. I've got to do it from the outside, which does make a little bump, but it's not as bad as you might think, because now we're going to go all the way through our pumpkin with our needle and come out. We want to come out the hole at the other end like that. And we're then going to pull on it so that we make a dimple. And then we've got to try and get this tight, this end. So we need to pull it, causing our dimple that end, and we need to sort of sew it, holding on to that, so that we don't lose that dimple. It's still there, yep. So this time round, we can make our knot. So we've got our dimple that end, and now we've got to do the same this side. So I'm going to catch this side. Just catch some yarn on the outside there. I'm going to go back in all the way to the other side. I'm going to pull it to make a dimple, and then we're going to do the same the other end. So we need to make sure that we hold this tight making that dimple before we secure this off. So I'm going to catch that yarn there. Okay, I've still got the dimple. This is a big fat one. Well, you know, they are all shapes and sizes after all. I'm going to go back through there and I'll pull it. And I've got my dimple both sides. So that's it. We're finished. All we've got to do now is end this off a little bit better. So you need to, on a bit where you're not going to see it, where it's gone in, just go through there a bit more so that we get rid of our end. And then I'm going to go in and back through my pumpkin. Doesn't matter where I come out, because I'm going to hide the yarn. And if you give it a little pull and then cut it, that end disappears inside the pumpkin. So here we are. We've got our little fat pumpkin. So this is what I mean. Now, I made these exactly the same. This one has less stuff in than this one. So I've now just got to work a stick in. And I've got quite a nice hole there to do that. So there we go. Pumpkin is made. So it's basically now just up to you to push and pull that stuffing into the shape that you want it to be. So you can kind of make it more narrow at the bottom if you want, just moulding it like that, so that it does become this kind of almost pepper shape like capsicum, or you can have it big and round. But you just push it into the shape you want, and there you go. You've made your first little pumpkin. And you can, if you want, you can sew this stick to make it a little bit more secure. You can get a stick that's got a bigger sort of twiggy end. Where's my twiggy end? Like this one here. It's a nice stick. And I sewed that one in a lot firmer. So all you use is your needle, and you just go around to make that hole extra tight. But this isn't going to be given to a child or anything like that as a toy, so it doesn't matter if it just sticks in there. It's just going to go in my bowl with the rest of them. So that's it. That's the pumpkin. Now, as I said to you before, you just choose different yarn and stuff it in a different way, and you will get various size pumpkins. And let's go up a bit. There we go. And you've got little fat pumpkins, big fat pumpkins, you know. World's your oyster, really. Just play with them. Okay, thanks for watching. And I hope that's been helpful to you and it wasn't too difficult. But, you know, we did sort of do all of the videos to get you to the stage where you could make these pumpkins. So hopefully it's not been too hard. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.